Hey, my name is Steve, composer, engineer, and lecturer. Welcome back to the channel and your first steps into the KONTAKT sampler. So far in this course, we've taken a look at the introduction and a little bit into the KONTAKT sampler itself. We've planned our first instrument and even recorded 2 of our first audio sources. Now that we have our bells and our plucks, I want to make some pads out of these sounds. So today we're going to take a look at how to process and manipulate audio to create something along those lines. Let's check it out. Okay, so when we're looking at manipulating the sound, there's a few things that we can do. The first one is actually reprocess the sound in other types of synthesizers or sample-based processing. This could be like granular synthesizers or something like that. The other way is then to also process further with effects. And sometimes you can even combine these two together. That is actually what I've done to create not one, but actually 2 different pad textures. I know my plan said I was going to create 1 pad texture, but after I created 1, I was like, oh, I want to hear what the second one might sound like. And yep, I've ended up with 2 textures. Oh well. So how have I done it? First of all, I have used pigments. If I open up pigments here, so Pigments is a fantastic synthesizer from Artura. It's something similar to like Serum or Omnisphere. It has different types of oscillators in there. So you've got basic waveforms, you've got wavetables, you've got samplers, harmonic ranges, all really cool stuff. And then what you can do is you can load your own sounds. So in the case of this particular one, I have gone through and loaded my own sound. And I think I've created something a little bit cool. What I've done here is relied on 2 sample-based processing techniques. The first one here, I've loaded up 1 sample, a simple single sample, and I've looped a little small section of it. So it just plays continuously. So if I hold down a key here, you'll see a play bar kind of going across continuously. In fact, I'll turn off the second synth engine so we can only hear that one. So it's just looping and looping and playing for as long as we like. Now the second sample engine, if I turn that one on and the other one off, I've loaded up a second oscillator, which is another sample type thing. These 2 combine together, and that's how we hear the texture that we're after. This particular one is doing something called granular synthesis. If I play a note here, has a very beautiful glassy light texture. I mean, it would be glass, of course. It's a glass itself that's actually ringing out. But what it's doing here is instead of looping an individual part, granular synthesis relies on taking tiny little milliseconds here and there from various places at random along the audio file and stitching them all together to blend into one note. By doing this, you create a little bit of a different type of texture. You can get something quite glitchy or quite smooth and pad-like, which is what I was going for. It's one of my favorite ways to turn a sound into something more pad-like is you take that single sample and run it through a granular synthesizer, and you can use a lot of controls to control the way that it samples different things, whether it plays them forwards or backwards, how far along the sample or close to the start point you are actually taking these little slithers as well as moving the start point. You can move that start point anywhere. You can move the density. You can change the stereo width. There's a lot of capabilities with granular synthesis, and it's a really awesome way of creating a very unique tone out of a recording that you've made. So when I combine those 2 together, it's a wonderful sound. Now we can add effects. Effects really change the way that we sample a sound because the sound is obviously going to be processed through these effects. If I jump in here, the pad that we've been working on sounds this way because I've added a couple of different effects on here. These are both from Sound Toys. The first one it's running through is the micro shift. That's giving it a little bit of a chorusy type vibe. And then the radiator, which giving it a little bit of heat, a little bit of a volume boost, a little bit of grittiness. Nothing too massive, just a little bit of saturation more than distortion. Now if I turn both of these off and play a simple C major chord, that's just Pigments working by itself. It already sounds quite nice, but we can definitely make it sound a lot better with some chorus. I love the way that this chorus is really helping those sparkly bits to the sound pop forward and dance around your head a little bit. It's really nice. And then we add in the radiator. It's bringing an overall boost and warmth and heat to it that I quite like as well. Now I went ahead and I actually sampled a second thing because I took both of those sampled sounds that was being processed through pigments from the glasses that I recorded. And then I was like, why don't I try this with the synth? So I created a second pad texture here using pigments just the same as before, this time though using the synth sounds, the plucks. So I have one here which is going through a granular synth and one here that's looping a particular point. Let's have a listen to those two. Beautiful texture. I really, it's just creating a wonderful pad out of something that was quite short and plucky before. It's taken away some of the bite, added more of the sustain and the evolution of sound, which is quite nice. I've also got on a little bit of shaping here. I've also shaped the tone a little bit with the EQ just to remove out some of the mud from the low end I didn't quite like. And that's kind of processed this all I've done there. Now, one thing I like to do once I've got all my samples created is actually give it a bit of a test drive. Now, of course, you can test drive it in the KONTAKT sampler, or you can just start coding it and just go for it. But I often like to do a quick kind of test with Logic Sampler just to see if they play nicely, see how it sounds. Don't worry, on this channel, I will be releasing details on how to use the Logic Sampler, so do consider subscribing to the channel and dinging that bell so that you get notified when that one drops. We're obviously focusing on KONTAKT Sampler, so don't get too hung up on what I'm doing right now. I just want to be able to show this as a bit of a proof of concept to see what the sounds sound like together. So on this track here, what I've done is I've got 4 different groups. Each one of these groups, I have my samples loaded into, and I've got my 2 pads, my bells, and my plucks. I've balanced some volume adjustments there just to, kind of make sure that they balance out quite nicely, because some were a bit too dominating if I added too much of them. But now, if I just play a note or a chord, starting to sound quite cool. I've actually even got some reverb that I've just thrown on here as well. Really sounding cool, that glass-like texture from pads 1, the kind of 80s inspired synthy type sound that it's kind of generating with these bell-like tones, mixed in with the synth. Yeah, I quite like it. It's turned out all right. Just going to reduce some of the attack here and you can really hear the bite of the bells. Really cool. It's kind of aggressive, gnarly kind of thing. It's definitely got that faux-alon or carillon type sound, but with very much a synth kind of heart to it now, which I kind of enjoy. I think those pads have really added something extra to it. So this is a little bit of a proof of concept. Logic Sampler works the same way as the KONTAKT Sampler, just without the kind of fancy UIs that you can create yourself. So it's worth kind of investigating. So as I say, subscribe to the channel, find out more soon. But this can be a great way of just quickly testing out your samples and seeing how they sound. Alright, now that we've made those pad sounds, we now are actually concluding Chapter 1. Chapter 1, of course, was planning our instrument and recording all of our audio samples, getting them ready for the KONTAKT sampler. In Chapter 2, we're going to dive into actually putting those audio samples into the KONTAKT sampler and getting it to play back via your keyboard so you can hear how your sample instrument is actually going to sound. In that chapter, we're going to look through all the necessary information to give you the fundamental grounding in the KONTAKT sampler. How groups and instruments work, how modulators work, how velocity and MIDI CC can impact what you're doing, and how to shape your notes with an envelope. All these things and more in Chapter 2, and then Chapter 3 will take a look at scripting a basic interface for your instrument. So subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on that. I'm looking forward to those videos. I hope you're enjoying the process of building your first instrument. Why not leave in the comments below what you've actually recorded and what you're taking forward into the next chapter. I would love to hear what you're doing. Why not ding the bell so you get notified when Chapter 2 starts arriving? And until then, I will catch you in the next one.